in any event, testing the sound and making sure you can hear us. So good morning, everyone. When I walked in and I saw full piano standing there, I thought, okay, maybe Rachmaninoff's Third or something like Bob Dylan's Times Are Changing would be better suited. But I guess that is a walk in the park compared to discussing what we are about to discuss this morning, and also vividly more interesting. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Also, thank you for the participants who are joining remotely and who will be, in due course, putting their questions in the chat as well. It's lovely to be here in Lisbon. Gabriela, you mentioned the city of Lisbon, and maybe because I know, we have ethics in the world of regulatory shift and market transformation happening. I think the sound is yes.
So.
And three words come to introducing each and every one of you before we start. But ethics, shift, and transformation. These are key words and words that make a lot of sense in the current landscape. So maybe I start by thanking Mr. Lee White to be here today, the president of IFAC, chair of IFAC, the International Federation of Accountants. Gabriela Figueiredo Dias, in many ways the host of this nation today and this conference, and the chair of IESBA. Panos Romidis, and this one is a difficult one, Committee of European Auditing Oversight Bodies, I got it right. And then last but certainly no least, because it's the easiest one to say, Deloitte. And so Megan Zietsman, who's the Global Audit and Assurance Quality Risk and Regulatory Leader at Deloitte. Thank you very much for being part of this panel. And it is, as ever, and we've heard today through our keynote speakers, various keynote speakers, that ethics, integrity, trust are in many ways the trinity of this discussion. I also know, because I was lucky enough to be able to speak to all of you before, that this is about being in the business of trust, first and foremost. And standards, if anything, are made of trust from an internal and an external perception across the board. It is also a different time where we find ourselves in a time where business takes a renewed importance across all sectors, audit, advisory included. So maybe I'd like to start, maybe if I may, I would start with Lee White as president of the IFAC. I think the sound is
it's in and out.
Yeah, I think the sound is very with checking. I think it's back. Yes. Something is not working there. It is about trusting IT as well.
Technology.
Very good.
Technology. I think it's fixed, right? Okay, we can go ahead. So if I may ask, and you said something very strong, which is boards ethics are for you set in stone. This should be part of any journey, of every itinerary, and despite shift, despite transformation, you still believe that these are set in stone.
Good morning. Thank you very much for that question, Alexandra. Set in stone or key foundation sort of are a bit interchangeable, but very much that's the view. And so the theme we're exploring in that question is really the contrast where you've got this strong sense of foundation and stability delivered via adherence to the ethical principles, yet the circumstances around in which the people who are operating continue to change and evolve. And so therefore, for me, you can see the great sense of importance to the ethical behaviour, the delivery, because with the level of volatility, unpredictability, uncertainty, if there is the true sense of expectation, and it should be earned, expectation of trust, then the ethical behaviours remain that strong foundation. And perhaps maybe we can, because I'm conscious of the times, But maybe we could come to some examples of what that would look like in a later conversation.
For sure, and also the role that the IFAC can play, leading the way and communicating across this idea that ethics are here to stay.
Very much, and when you think that we have more than 4 million professional accountants around the globe, that is in effect a huge grouping of skilled individuals, all with a strange sense of commitment to ethics.
Okay, so I'm going to bring in an example or a metaphor to shed some light on the root, and one that will be familiar to Gabriela and to most of the Portuguese in the room, but also maybe the ones who visited Lisbon already. If you find your way, or if you don't find your way, you will find out that by asking anyone on the street, Lisbon resident, Lisbon local, can you help me finding the way too? And I'll come to the point on how standards and asking help on the street can be coincident. Any person in Lisbon will not only, try to find a way to see where you want to go, but even more so, they will drop their route and they will take the time to go and find the route and show it to you themselves. It's very typical in Lisbon. It is in many ways, and there are some coincidences with standards and setting the standards. So you go out of your way to make sure that others are on their way. Is that so, Gabrielle?
Thank you very much, Alexandra. And before I try to respond, let me greet my fellow panelists, the White Megan panelists. Thank you very much for joining us, and I prefer today to listen than to speak. But of course, it's not leaving our way to show the way to the others, but the mission and the offer of the IESBA is really to set global standards which help everyone find a way in the same way. As we heard already today, it's a global language that we try to set, and this global language, it's not an end in itself. We don't set standards, ethics standards, to set standards. It's not an objective per se. It's really to make this a useful tool and instrument to have all professionals around the world have the same approach and abide by the same rules or norms and meet the same expectations without the risk of fragmentation, of acting differently, of making different choices, etc. It's a difficult area, it's a difficult field, it's about conduct. And conduct is human, and everything that is human, what it takes.
It's also about transformation of those very same
It's also about transformation. It's really, in my opinion, it's really what drives transformation, what makes the change. If ethical standards are not able to drive change, behavior change, etc., then they are not useful. It's really about transforming professional conduct. It's also about transforming the organizations themselves. The firms, which, as someone said, I think it was, Jean-Paul Servet, the minister, it requires constant monitoring, updating, understanding what is needed in every moment, but it takes the organizations themselves, not only the professionals, to abide by these ethical norms. And in times of change, where everything is changing, I think it's easy to say for some that ethics doesn't matter because we are focused on competitiveness, we are focused on growth, we are focused on profit, etc. It matters more than ever, because when uncertainty kicks in, and Lee White mentioned it, when there is uncertainty, when regulation, when you face a little bit of deregulation, sometimes called simplification, but it's more about deregulation, different levels of supervision and fragmentation. What is there to guide the professionals to manage risk? It's really a risk management tool, besides other things, is ethical conduct.
And let me introduce, the other through the looking glass. So when you say ethics on one side, on the other side of the looking glass, you have regulators very often. maybe not as many hands and legs that you would need, maybe not at the speed that would be favored, especially in a time where technology takes over everything and accelerates everything and makes everything more challenging, but also an opportunity. And Panos, looking at you and mostly thinking within the concept of a European auditing oversight bodies, the regulatory aspect that is also sitting on our title, obviously, and the shift. In itself, it's a challenge, so lots to do in terms of bringing in the regulation within the geopolitical dynamics that are currently going on. I mean, on one side of the Atlantic and the other side of the Atlantic, it doesn't really matter. It matters that everyone is looking at the same in terms of regulation.
Yeah, okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody, to all the virtual listeners as well. Thank you for the question. Yeah, obviously there are so many opportunities and risks. You mentioned technology, first of all. Technology is something that we see is a great opportunity for audit quality to improve, because it will definitely make sure that there are tools to identify the red flags. But what I would like to stress is there should be professional skepticism in using technology. This is very important. I would like to emphasize that. You mentioned that there are many diversities, yes, and there is a lot of fragmentation, as Gabriela said. So we have to get aligned with all the international standards and make sure that we use consistently the same international standards. Otherwise, there is a lot of fragmentation.
And how can that be achieved? Because that is often the challenge.
That will take time. That will take a lot of time. But in terms of regulation, how we see it is that in terms of regulation, the regulators can only inspect up to the national borders. So if there is a transnational, let's say, audit, it makes it very difficult for us to go and inspect the working papers outside the jurisdiction and even enforce, let's say, an audit that goes bad. So what's the solution? We have to make sure that we enter into some MOUs with other audit regulators. And what I would like to stress is there has to be level playing field for everybody, for all the audit firms. No matter where they operate, there has to be level playing field in terms of the standards they use, but also the regulation and the oversight. Otherwise, there's going to be regulatory arbitrage, and this is something that we need to tackle. We have the forums, we have the AFIR and the COB that we exchange a lot of information. We're trying to get more aligned in terms of process and procedure, but there's still a long way to go.
Okay, so let me level this to the ground and have a reality check from what it feels like when you have audit firms on the ground, and couldn't be better represented than Deloitte, one of the largest ones, and so one of the most well-known firms. We've mentioned ethics, we've mentioned standards, we've mentioned business, but the reality is when you're on the ground and you are not only operating but also attracting future generations of talent into this field, how to convey this whole message is I would say a difficult task, man.
Yeah, no, for sure. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. And I think, you kind of just really listening and reflecting to the opening remarks and even just the initial part of this panel, I think we operate in what we sometimes call at Deloitte, and it's not a Deloitte-specific term, but a VUCA world. So it's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and that's not going away. And that makes the pace of change is just continuing to accelerate. But I think that means that ever more the importance of ethics and integrity and ethical behavior needs to underpin the way in which you deal with these challenges and that you respond to these risks. I think things like making sure that there is tone from the top, that trickles down through an organization, that you have expectations for ethical leadership, and leaders need to act and demonstrate by doing, not just talking about things. It needs to filter through, and it needs to filter through the organization. So I think within the firms we're very focused on things like that by having strong, robust codes of conduct and ethical behavior, which are built on the global ethics code. And can't agree more with Panos that you need a global baseline. So I think as the largest firms, we all see the need and the fundamental importance of having that global baseline, because as things become fragmented, and we certainly are operating in a world where things are becoming fragmented and there's a risk of a lot of fragmentation, it's things like those global codes and global standards that really pull it together and keep the gaps. But it's also the importance of those codes and standards being principle-based and not being too detailed and prescriptive, because you can't write things today that will always stand the test of time. I think people talk about future-proofing and all this kind of thing, but personally, I don't believe that you can write something that is too detailed that will be future-proofed. The way to future-proof your standards and your codes is to keep them robust, but really have the principles, because those are the things you have to fall back on when things evolve and unexpected things happen.
So the sense is that ethics have become the baseline. We are not going back. We're not about to go back on that, actually forward, but geodynamics and other factors are testing multiple fronts of the way we move forward to business. Maybe at this point we can bring in the current poll where we are, just because I'd like to bring that into the argument. Linda, I don't know if it's possible to have do we have the polling results already? At least halfway? Yeah. And reminding you that the question is, in today's fast-changing market and regulatory environment, how do you see the role of ethics and ethical leadership? If it's increasingly important, less important, or about the same as today. So let's have a look at how people have voted so far. Or maybe not. Okay. So it's of increasing importance visibly, overwhelmingly. Interesting to see that 1% thinks it's less important. That gives us pretty much an answer, or at least...
There's always one.
There's always one, yes, to keep the balance. Interestingly, we have 9% at this stage, who say it's about the same as today. I'd like to focus on that because I'd like to also understand, how we move people from the 9 to the 90, and how we, is this something? And I guess it's a question for the four of you. Is this something that we can value? Megan, you mentioned the baseline of ethics. Mm-hmm. How can we value? I will not use KPIs, but I will use, how can we value ethics in a way that also brings value to organizations, to people, to teams, and to the work delivered? Is there a way that can be valued internally and externally? And I'll come to the perception in a minute. Do you think?
I can jump off. Obviously, things like ethics you mentioned, you really establish sets of KPIs and very discrete quantitative things that you can measure. But there are ways in which you can measure ethical culture, measure commitment, and measure the way in which people within an organization feel about them. So within Deloitte, and I think many of the other large global networks do the same, we run every year global ethical surveys. So we have a robust survey that we have all of our people, and at Deloitte we have almost 500,000 people around the world. They complete that survey, and then we look at the outcomes. Sometimes the value is in the trends, so when you start to see things that might have shifted from one year to another, and that's sometimes a wake-up call for leaders to realize maybe where people are feeling not as comfortable or anxious maybe than what they were in the past. So it gives lots of things to look at and to focus on, and I think it's an important metric. But I think the other ways in which you measure ethics is really how organizations and people respond in times of crisis.
Exactly.
And, we deal with hard things every single day. And sometimes the easy answer is not the right answer. And that's where you really have to fall back on those ethical values and having the right culture within an organization that promotes consultation, collaborative decision-making, and really just doing the right thing.
And also externally, I guess. So
that's
I think
right.
Stakeholders from the outside as well, so Lee?
Alexandra, could I just add a little bit to what Megan just introduced, and it goes back to my first remarks. But in the times, which is what the question of the survey is suggesting, when there's difficulties, fast-moving, uncertainty, when there's problems, is when the value of the ethics really needs to come through. Not in the good times, it's really important there as well, but when there's hard decisions. So imagine you're the CFO of a very significant listed organisation, the pressure coming from the market always to deliver more results, better results on the whole cyclical reporting, and all of a sudden the market shifts in a way you hadn't predicted. How you respond to delivering the news in a very clear, honest and transparent way to the market is incredibly important. I can only emphasise again what Megan said, at the difficult times is when the value of the ethics needs to really come through.
So I guess transparency, but also the communication and the external and internal of that transparency takes an important role at that stage.
Very much. Back to the principles of the IESBA code, transparency, integrity, this is all in which you need to employ in dealing with those challenges.
I heard, and I took note of Jean-Paul Servet's reference to financial inclusion and in many ways how that also plays a part in that external perception, reputation, but also more broadly understanding of what ethics means at large, inside the business, outside the business. And Gabriela, the standards are a convening call for that as well. Can it go beyond the accounting sector, let's put it that way? Is there more to be told outside and to others?
Well, yes, of course. But before I go directly to your question, there is, if you spoke about, you mentioned financial education, understanding, there is a matter of understanding, which I think it's crucial with respect to ethics, because there is a natural understanding bias, which tends to look at ethics as something like morals, moral principles. My principle, my moral principles, your moral principles, your religion is nothing about that. It has nothing to do, we are not in the business of what we call soft ethics. We are in the business of hard ethics. And hard ethics means conduct norms. Norms that everyone recognizes as valuable, as collective, as setting the expectations and deciding and telling everyone what to do and what not to do. This said, how much this can go beyond the profession. Of course, our work is directed to accountants and to the accounting profession. I don't need to speak and to mention about how crucial this is. It's about, we heard it, it's about financial information and how much it supports capital markets, financial systems, and etc. It's about tax, for instance. It's about auditors and accountants providing tax services and how they ethically behave. If this can go beyond, we wish, yes, but it's not that different from what other professions experience. I see, for instance, some lawyers here in the audience, and by the way, from some big firms, and if anything, they face the same, I was going to say dilemma, and it's not a dilemma, but they face the same issue, which is, what is the value of ethics? How much are you ready to give away to stick to ethical principles, knowing, or at least I hope you know, knowing that in the long run it will pay. It will pay more than what you give away today. So I think that what we are doing, being formally directed to accountants, can at least inspire others and other professions, some of them who are providing the same services in sustainability reporting, tax advisory services, and etc. Why would one profession have strong ethical standards and the others not? So this is almost a philosophical question, but of course, at least as an inspiration for the others, I think it's something that may go well beyond the profession.
And inevitably, things like technology, AI, and the challenge of the philosophical challenge of technological ethics, if we can put it that way. When you bring AI into the picture, when you bring, a true revolution in the way firms work, it's a challenge, right? How do you set, yes, you set the trust, the principles, the culture, the transparency. And how can you put that across? And even, I think, regulators also play an important role there. How do you pass on that legacy to the technology side of things coming into firms? I don't have the answer, but maybe you do.
Yeah, let me take this question. I think with AI in ethics, it gives you the opportunity to tailor the training. So, because it's adaptive. So if a specific person would like to have a specific training, then it can adapt. You don't offer the same training to all the people, it adapts them. And that's a great opportunity because it can improve the knowledge according to the needs of a person. In addition, you can have the AI chatbots, like ethical hotlines, where they're anonymous, so people can speak more freely. They don't talk to a person, they talk to AI, and they can give them advice. So that's another tool that we could have in the future, use technology. Also AI that can scan news or social media and analyze the ethical reputation of an entity.
Exactly.
So another tool that technology can help and analyze the ethical reputation. And in addition, you have the machine learning models where if a department consistently has bad results, then it can predict the likelihood of having bad results, audit quality failures in the future. So these machine learning tools are also useful as well. And also, I'm going to show another one, the natural language processing tool that analyzes emails, reports, and so on, and can give you signs for maybe fraud, bribery, and so on. So that's another use of technology used in ethics.
Is this what you're seeing in practice and big firms?
Yeah, no, I think all of those examples are fantastic ways in which technology really is revolutionizing things. And I think really the emergence of all of this new technology, including AI, generative AI, agentic workforce, all of these things is really, it's beyond efficiency. It's fundamentally transforming the nature of the profession and what we do. Obviously the profession is evolving to more data-driven methods, more analytical approaches, and I think Panos' examples are exactly the kinds of things that are changing things. Obviously with that comes risk, but it also comes with challenge. But I think picking up on what you said earlier about the importance of skepticism and judgment, and I think that's really the key, the core values of judgment, that professional skepticism and the emphasis on professional, because that's really where it's bounded, and that critical judgment, the ethical conduct, really remain paramount importance, and that's really our responsibility as we start to embrace and deal with these new challenges, that we don't lose sight of all of that. And I think really the future, at least in my view, of audit is not about replacing human judgment. It's about augmenting human judgment and providing the ability for humans to be making better judgments because they're better informed through better use of analysis of data and use of technology.
So of those 4 million registered members at the IFAG, is AI one of their, are they reaching out to the IFAG with AI in mind? Are they curious about other things than AI? What are the main concerns that, as you convene these 4 million registered accountants, in your view, what are they looking for? What is inspirational for them? What is the next thing in accounting?
So, Alexandra, there's probably about 4 or 5 parts to that question. Let me try and tackle it. Across the 4 million, I would put to you today, every one of those professional accountants at this moment is doing some level of, involved in some level of experimentation, use of the AI. So the curiosity, the professional curiosity from accountants is just going higher and higher in use of the AI technology. Like all of us, it's a little bit of a journey.
Without boundaries, or creating the boundaries. Correct. As you go.
And so I think there's a combination where you will find governments at times or government departments setting in place some barriers, but us as a professional global professional accountant, we will provide that sense of direction as well, not to infer or suggest not to be using it. That, as Megan just said, would be a very bad outcome. very bad for our profession. We need to embrace, but we need to embrace it and use it in an appropriate and ethical way. And you can see some of the core skills of professional accountants, auditors in particular, are absolutely vital to the use of the technologies in an appropriate and ethical way. And that takes us into sort of the structuring of the AI governance and how that governance then works and is validated as well.
And can I ask you, if you look ahead in 5 years, 10 years' time, well, 5 years, let's go for 5 anyway, is this the legacy that you think can be passed on to future accountants who are entering the profession as we speak?
I'm not sure I'd use that word legacy, but we may look back in 5 years' time and see this is one of those pivot points for our profession where we've always been strongly recognised for the skills, the education, our ethical adherence we bring. But then the next generation sees us as being incredibly digital technology savvy. And those types of combinations, it's irresistible for the next generations of accountants.
And also coming to you and then come to you both, is the stability of the profession in a world of instability, and I mean a financial stability, a career progression, also part of that narrative that can be put out in a way that favors this ethics roots that we are seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely, and maybe building on kind of what Lee has said. I mean, I do believe we're at a really key or crucial point of the pace of change, this complexity that we need to deal with. And I also am not sure I would talk about it as a legacy. I think it's more of a responsibility, and I think it's a collective responsibility. I think the things that we have to deal with, the challenges, we've got to make sure that we do establish and maintain those ethical guardrails, think about the risks, and really deal with all of this very sensibly and responsibly. I mean, I think the details of many things will be very, very complex, very challenging, and that's why we need to work collectively to make sure that we all kind of work together, because the risk is that we don't work properly across the ecosystem, and then we don't set up the future the way it should be set up.
Paolo, do you see it the same way from a European perspective, or is it any different than the route that has just been described?
The way we see it is that definitely ethical companies, they can attract customers, first of all, so they work with customer loyalty, but also talent. The millennials and Gen Z generation, when they see a highly valued ethical company, they are more willing to pursue a career. So they are rewarded, I would say, with a competitive advantage. So that's one huge incentive to follow at a very high standard ethics. And regarding for the next generation, I think, as we discussed, there is AI, sustainability, we have the cross-border data. I think ethics should evolve, including all these topics, so we can pass on to the next generation, including these as well into the principles. So because these are topics that we are currently facing all the time.
Yeah, I'll just jump in on that, and I think the importance of understanding how the next generation think about things. And, they think about things differently, their experiences are framed differently. They've really grown up in a different world than what
Exactly.
Not that I like to age us, or maybe I'll just speak for myself, but, I think even just looking at my daughters who are in their early 20s, the way they've grown up is completely different to the way I grew up, and that definitely shapes the way they think and act. And therefore, I think as business leaders, we all need to be thinking about, they're going to be incentivized differently, they're going to react differently. They also need to be challenged in a different way, which I think also gets to the whole attractiveness of the profession. So we're bringing in different skill sets, different ways of thinking across cultures, all that kind of stuff. So it's vastly complex.
There's never been such a large cross-generational divide at workplace as we do have now. So, Gabriela, in your view as well, how looking ahead, what is the message to be passed on to the next generation coming into
in terms of technology?
No, in terms of ethics, in terms of how to pass on the culture, the ethics, the opportunity, the challenge?
Yeah. The challenge is big, I think bigger than it has ever been, but as I said, the need for the next generation as this one to stick to strong ethical standards is absolutely obvious to me. So technology is opening a lot of opportunities, as we heard, for the new generations, for the firms, for the profession, not only in terms of attraction, because they can see the profession as something, involving a lot of technologies more close to their hearts, but also it opens a lot of opportunities because it releases professionals from a lot of manual activities, and their brains will better use in what they really need to do and provide to the public interest, to companies, to help identifying issues, help fighting financial crime, and we will have a panel on that, using technology appropriately to cover a wider range of information and not just parts of it, which brings other challenges, etc. So it puts it brings a lot of challenges as well in terms of ethics and independence. So the opportunities are huge. They should be all taken on board, but it will drive not only significant challenges from an ethical perspective, and the IESBA is working on it and identifying and trying to provide responses and etc. In terms of independence, because you have the same firms, look at the big firms, but also not so big ones, providing technology services and at the same time being the auditors, how this is going to work together. New questions are already being raised about the limits of this possibility, but it will drive and is driving also a market transformation, and it's something that the new generations may want to look at as well, because as providing technology services to the clients, namely to big clients, by, for instance, big four firms, is becoming more and more important. The independence may force different choices in terms of audit and open other opportunities to other audit services providers. So it's the market itself that is being transformed. It's the firms, which this all requires the firms to be more and more prepared to face this challenge. The multidisciplinary firms are apparently more necessary, and it's driving a big change how the work is being done. And that can be attractive for the new generations.
So we've got a question precisely down that line, and it's coming from Peter Franklin, who is watching this remotely. He'd like to know, and we've discussed a bit of that, but how do you all see the future of the profession, of the accountancy profession in these turbulent times? You've hit at transformation, Megan has written at shift, and Lee and Panos have mentioned profusely on ethics. So I don't know which of the four of you would like to address Peter's question.
I'll have first crack at that. Peter, thank you so much for your question. I see it in very bright, very, very bright. And I see it that way because where we come already is a profession very strong in the skills and the experience, the education and the ethics that it already has. Then when we interplay about the future, where the role that it could play within sustainability, the transformation. Secondly, what I referred to earlier, that the embedding of the digital practices, the technology, adds then a very different breadth of experience. So at times, we're still weighed down by the old perception that, we're good for the numbers. But for me, that is just broadening, and we can show to the next generations how vibrant our profession is. So not at risk.
And can I add a line to this question, which is, can it also bring opportunities for older people in the profession? Because as you go further with technology, as you can work from home and other places, that also offers not only the young but the older possibilities to continue and transform the profession. Is that a valid argument?
If I play back your question, how do we ensure that the vibrancy of the profession isn't always just about the next generations coming in, but the retention and perhaps the bilateral recruiting? Very much. You know, we should use all of our attributes to build more and experienced professionals, irrespective of how they come in or are retained into our profession.
A repository of also experience and shared knowledge across different generations, which is only possible with frankly, the digital side of things that we are witnessing. I don't know, Linda, if there are more questions that are coming in, or yes, we may have another one, I think. Do we have any other question coming in? If we don't, then I'd like maybe to come to the end of this panel. Before we do, a few words of advice for the next accountant who's concluding his studies right now and will enter the profession. The four of you together, somehow, we do have one more question. Gone, yes. So Brian McNary from also the online audience is asking if EAOs will have to substantially change their CV to go really deep into tech.
I'm happy to have a crack at it. I'm just conscious.
Well, no, I'm happy to go. I mean, I think yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we all have to embrace the fact that we have to embrace technology and embrace the new challenges and get smart. And I think it's also part of being a profession and having a commitment to continuous learning, which I think is another hallmark of the profession. So I think that, the same old is not going to be fit for purpose as the world evolves.
And just to add a slight bit, so when I read Brian's question, and thank you for the question, Brian, it isn't about leaving behind part of the curriculum that's been in place, which builds the strength of our education and experience, but it is alluding to that needs to be shaped into how services are delivered, professionals operate looking ahead. So it's building upon, not leaving behind.
It's about working smarter, probably on what you already have, building on that. In building, I would say, ethics as well. I maybe would like to ask Linda if we have another question, or if we can look at the final result of the polls at this stage. Can we look at the final result? Probably we now have 99%.
There's a question there.
There's a question.
Another one, good. So Chris Hawes is also online. He's asking, technology and AI are transforming the audit profession. How do we ensure that high quality levels of integrity and objectivity and professional skepticism is maintained and the use of technology doesn't have, well, we can't read it from here.
Remove or reduce it. Remove or reduce
this.
Remove or reduce this,
remove
exactly.
or
So basically the impact of technology in the transformation of audit of the audit profession. I think we've covered a bit of that in the discussion, unless we've left some thoughts out that any of the four of you would like to add.
I think it's the response is taking the standards, the ethics standards, even as they are today, they are prepared to give a response to every dilemma or difficulty that the professional may face today with the use of technology and AI. So it takes awareness that there are risks, and it takes taking and being attentive to the standards and make sure that the fundamental principles, objectivity, integrity, etc., but also the specific standards, ethics standards on related to the use of technology are really put in place.
May also add that in Europe there is an EU AI Act which regulates all the AI tools, and I hope that other jurisdictions around the world follow the example of Europe. I think there are opportunities but also risks, so unless it is regulated, then you will have all these, ethical risks as well. So that's one way where you can ensure that the ethical standards are maintained to at least an acceptable level.
And if I may, besides regulation and standards, it's really about embedding ethics in the organizations, in the firms, throughout the firms, as Megan was saying, not only at the top, which is necessary, but making sure that it penetrates throughout the firm and makes part of the DNA and day-to-day action of the professionals.
Gabriela, you once said that standards are like seatbelts on airplanes. When the ride is bumpy, they are very useful. And even when they aren't, they're mandatory. So thank you all very much for being on this panel today discussing ethics in a world of regulatory shifts and market transformation, in the business of ethics, in the business of transparency, making sure that technology is with the profession along the way. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for...
Thank you.
Thank you.